Hello and welcome to this webinar, the Next Geos webinar series. Today, again, this year, we are cooperating with Geo, this subgroup of equality, diversity, and inclusion. My name is Bente Liljaby, and first of all, I would like to say Happy International Women's Day. We congratulate all of you, and we send our regards and the best wishes to all of you. We have a very interesting program today, and as you can see, I have some experts on things related to the ocean, and I'm very excited to hear the different perspectives we can have on ocean. And also, of course, since today is the International Women's Day, we are also talking about the women's role in different aspects of science, Earth observations, and the ocean. So in order to get started, I thought we could warm up with some weather reports. This is a signature on my webinar. And I will encourage you to tell us where you are and what the weather is like. In the chat, you have a chat on the right-hand side, and that's where you can comment and ask questions later. But let us know where you are and say hello and tell us about the weather. And we can start actually with our speakers and let them do some weather reporting before we get started on the program. We can start with you, Ute. What is the weather like and where are you?
Hey, my name is Ute Brönner and I'm currently located in Rostock, that is in Germany at the lovely Baltic Sea. We have splendid weather. It's quite cold, but it's sunshine, it's spring, flowers are out, it's lovely.
Sounds very nice. We are going then on the other side of the channel, I believe. Maybe Heather, can you tell us where you are and what the weather is like?
Yes, indeed. My name is Heather Coldaway and I'm in the far west of the UK in Cornwall, right by the beautiful part of the Atlantic Ocean. It's raining because it's Britain.
Yeah, sounds familiar. That's what we expect. Well, let's travel a little bit further. Maike, where are you and what's the weather like where you are?
So I'm in the state of Washington on the west coast of the United States. I'm currently on the east side of the mountains there, and I just looked at the weather. It's -1 and it's gray. Very unusually for Washington State, it's going to be sunny later today. Normally it rains here as well.
Yeah, I guess I heard that too. Okay, Natalie, we come to you. I guess we are back in Europe.
Yes, you are in London, and I have to tell you that they're all lying to you. The UK is sunny. It's blue sky here. It's relatively warm. They've been lying to you forever. This is a very sunny country.
Per definition, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, so, well, as I said, my name is Bente Liljaby. I'm Norwegian, and right now I'm in a place close to Oslo, on the countryside, and we have the most beautiful weather. It's warmer than normal, a little bit below zeros during the night, so we still have some ice, but we feel the spring in the air now. So again, let us know where you are and tell us what the weather is like. We will start the program now. So we will learn about different aspects of the ocean and gender on aspects then to the ocean topics. We will start with a very exciting concept, namely the digital twin of the ocean. So we will learn about that. We will then move on to artificial intelligence. Sorry, we will move on to marine conservation, I think, and some gender perspectives. And then we will go to artificial intelligence and the health of the ocean. And Natalie will conclude with some summaries and inform you a little bit about how we are working on gender issues or equality, diversity and inclusion in the group on Earth observations. We go through the presentations. We'll go one after the other. There is, if you have questions or for clarifications, we might answer them in between the speakers. Otherwise, we will do a Q&A at the end. And with that, I think this is being recorded, and I think that all the speakers are ready to share their presentations, and you will learn more about the speakers as they are presenting. So everyone will start with a short introduction about themselves, so you get to know them a little bit, and then you will learn the topic. So Ute, let's hear about the digital twin of the ocean. The floor is yours.
Do you see my screen?
Yes. And the rest of us turn off our cameras and the microphone while you are speaking, and then we come back when we are changing speaker.
Thank you, Bente. So I'm very excited because the name of my talk is Digital Twins of the Ocean, and what could be more exciting? But I want to talk about how we can do this through alliance-driven and co-creation and interoperability, because there are so many existing systems out there. So my name is Ute Brönner, which is very difficult for people outside of Germany. I appreciate that, but try to learn it. So I like to work with ocean data. I have a background in mathematics and computer science, and I'm really interested about ocean data and data specifically, and how we can combine data sources to make new solutions. I am currently, as I said, a guest researcher at Fraunhofer's for a year. And the reason I am here, you can see in the lower middle, and that is something that we call the Digital Ocean Lab. It's a test site at the coast of the Baltic Sea where we do ocean technology testing, and we're currently digitizing this part of the ocean. I'm also a member of the UN Ocean Decay Data Coordination Group. That is very interesting to work with people from all over the world, how to organize and make something really good with all the data that is spread around the world. And I'm a work package leader in the project that I'm now talking about, which is called Iliad. And this is one of the projects that is realizing the digital twin of the of the ocean for Europe, for the European Commission. So what is a digital twin? Most people may not know this, or a digital twin can actually be something that is just defined through the application. So it can mean different things for different people. But what I like to say, it's a digital counterpart of something that you want to study. And it gives you the possibility to bend it, to break it, to test it, to try things without even destroying or really destroying the real life thing. And if we talk ocean and environment, that is really important, because we don't want to kill the ocean. We don't want to destroy or pollute the oceans. But here you can have so-called what-if scenarios, and you can just test out things and see what they behave. So this is now the example of a wind farm, of a wind turbine, which is not a part of the ocean, but they are now moving offshore. So wind farms will be in the ocean, and in the ocean, everything is connected. So also this wind farm will have an effect on the ocean, and the ocean will have an effect on the wind farm. So if we have a closer look on this, so we have the wind turbine, and the part of the wind turbine that is above the sea surface. And that is, of course, exposed to the atmosphere, to the wind that is blowing there. The lower part will be exposed to waves. But then it comes the part where the wind turbine gets into the ocean, and then we are interested in what is happening in the ocean. So what is the temperature like? What is the salinity like? And do these conditions affect the wind farm? Or does the wind farm, the wind turbine making wind, affect currents or wave patterns in the ocean? And then there's, of course, everything that is in the ocean, not only man-made things, but also the things that are there from before, the biology. So how is biology affected? How is the seafloor, for example, affected by installing a wind farm? Or it could be any other ocean industry, really. So we would be interested what has been on the seafloor beforehand, and what does this wind farm now introduce to the ocean, maybe new habitats, artificial reefs. So all these things. And if we make a digital counterpart of this whole ecosystem with all this inside, then we can study this and do these what-if scenarios. we could even apply climate change scenarios to see, does climate change have an effect on the wind farms, and can we have these kind of industry in the future? And this, as I said, it's not only applying to wind farms, it's also can be applied to other coastal structures, to tourism, to all things that we humans like to do in the water. So a digital twin of the ocean can, of course, only be made by many digital twins of small parts of the ocean. And like a quilt, it's then being a system of system, and it develops to the whole. So it's rather towards a digital twin of the ocean, and we try to do as many patches in the ocean as we would like to. And these can be digital twins to study climate change. This can be digital twins to study tourism. This can be digital twins to monitor things in the ocean, harbor safety. There are a lot of applications. So the European Commission has several initiatives to work towards a digital twin. And actually, they do not only want to work towards a digital twin of the ocean, but we are working towards a digital twin of the Earth. So the ocean will, of course, be a major part of this. And this is mainly funded by the so-called Green Deal. Europe has the ambition to be the first continent to be climate neutral. And it's realized by the so-called Mission Ocean, which is a mission to restore healthy seas and ocean by 2030. And there are several projects and initiatives that are funded through these activities. We have all the mission calls, we have other calls, and we have the Green Deal calls. And one of the Green Deal calls that was funded is called ILIAD. So ILIAD is now a journey towards the digital twin of the ocean. We have the ambition to make a framework to realize these digital twins together, very close, connected to the mission, where the core ocean model suite and the digital platform for these missions and for the digital twins will be developed. You may know that the EU mission is organized in the European Sea basin. So we have the Atlantic and Arctic, we have the North and Baltic Sea, we have the Mediterranean, and we have also the Danube with a freshwater system. And there are many applications that are planned and that can be realized by co-creation and working together towards this digital twin. So, and then these EU initiatives will be part of something bigger, because of course the ocean does not stop in the EU, but it's a global ocean, and there is the Ocean Decade for Sustainable Development, and there is a program that is called DITTO, and also DITTO is working towards digital twins of the ocean in a system approach, mainly working also towards climate change scenarios or hazard predictions and things like that. But I can only encourage you to look at all these links that are there, and also at the article that describes all the initiatives that work towards digital twins of the ocean right now. So what is ILIAD? Now coming to ILIAD. ILIAD is now this funded project from the Green Deal, and we have the very ambitious task to bring together data from all these assets that are existing in the EU already. So all these data platforms that exist, and we want to bring them together in a platform that let you develop new services and new applications on them. And now we're coming. So why is this important for co-creation or collaboration or inclusion or the Women's Day? We are 56 partners from over 18 countries, and we are developing loads of pilots. So on this slide, you see a pilot on wind farms, a pilot on aquaculture. We have marine pollution, we have citizen science, and these pilots are developed. And that is what I think is something special about ILIAD, because we want to use a framework that invites people to share their data in a trusted environment. And I have the feeling that is a bit of a female approach, maybe I'm completely wrong. but this co-creation is often and harmonized working together. I often consider this as something that women like to work in. So we are not specifically good when it comes to the part of, or the part of the women that are working in this. We are about 25% of women in this project, but the women are leading the very important work packages. So our project manager is a woman. It's Vivian from Greece. Then we have the work package on citizen science that is led by women in France. Then we have the work package on capacity building, which is led by no one else than Bente, who is moderating this webinar today. And we have the work package about impact and what these digital twins and what impact these digital twins pilots might have in the future, and that is led by me. So what we want to do is, in contrast to a data lake that you might know, or a keystone-driven architecture, where you have one party who says, I want to do this, and all my partners deliver the data into a data lake, and I will provide this application. We want to go to an alliance-driven architecture where we have connectors between federated data storages. And so we want to build our digital twins on Gaia-X. And Gaia-X is the European initiative for trusted data sharing, where people can share data into the cloud while having the trust and the data security and the data sovereignty to decide who am I sharing my data with and on what premises am I sharing these data with. So this is what we call Gaia-X. And this is also where the connection to Next.Geos comes in, because we are, of course, not doing everything from scratch. But this is the Gaia-X ecosystem. So you have the X in the middle that stands for Gaia-X, and Gaia-X is really the data storage infrastructure with the values for trust into data storage, into the cloud, data protection, data sovereignty, data interoperability. So also FAIR is a very important property here. And you have to be part of an ecosystem like Gaia-X. Gaia-X is very open and invites everybody to be a part of this, but you just have to implement some services where you say, okay, I am part of this, and this is why I obey to specific rules. And these rules are, for example, that you have to provide a catalog of the data, and Next.Geos has done a significant work on this already, also for identity management. And so then you can also have access to the data, and also you can have machine-to-machine access to the data, because we will implement an ocean vocabulary, an ocean information model, and this will be then and result in an ocean interoperability data space where we can invite partners to share their data. Also, partners from the private sector, for example, who usually are very hesitant to share their data because they do not trust in sharing their data into the cloud without knowing what they're really doing. So I'm really looking forward to this project. It has just started on the 1st of February. Many people, many partners, very interesting people, very interesting women. So I thank you again for letting me be here and presenting ILIAD, and I look forward to any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ute. It's indeed a very exciting project to be a part of, and you just heard I'm also a part of that. Now, I don't see that there are any questions in the chat. Don't be shy, write in the chat, and we will be able to address or have it as a discussion point at the end of the webinar. I provided you with a link to the project that Ute was presenting, so you can study it more in detail at your convenience. And now I think we are ready to move on and hear about marine conservation. Sorry, I'm missing. What did I decide to do? The marine conservation and gender perspectives. So Heather, can you introduce yourself shortly and let us learn about marine conservation?
Yeah, this is a very exciting day to have the opportunity to present. And I think it just shows the diversity of women working in ocean science. When you hear what I'm going to present about today, that is about marine conservation and gender perspectives. So my name is Heather Coldaway. I'm Senior Technical Specialist at the Zoological Society of London, and I'm an honorary professor at the University of Exeter. I have worked for ZSL for for 27 years now, and have worked on a lot of international marine conservation projects. So the perspective I wanted to give today was some of those experiences over those years, looking at really how both my research and conservation projects have been founded in delivering solutions for marine conservation. So that's what I'm always looking to achieve. And I wanted to start with saving a fish. And the earliest marine conservation work that I got involved with was around saving seahorses, which not only are very cute, or as about as cute as a fish gets, but particularly as a woman working in conservation and marine science, and also being a mother, it was exciting to work on a fish where the males get pregnant. And this has been a really interesting aspect from a biological perspective, but also has helped from a conservation perspective. Now, the work in the Philippines the work around seahorse conservation actually led in 1996 for me co-founding Project Seahorse with two international colleagues and building collaborations, particularly in the Philippines, which at that time was the center of the seahorse trade. And what we were looking at was how to find solutions that conserved seahorses, but also supported the communities that depended on them. And this meant really investigating the seahorse fishery, understanding how and why seahorses were being caught, what management measures might be possible, how we go about conserving seahorses, and what conservation tools might work in this instance. But while doing this, we obviously were engaging primarily with fishers, who are mainly men, and started to have conversations with women in the community. And what was really interesting was that the women did not identify in having any role at all in the fishery, or really in the marine, a role to play in marine management. Yet when we spoke to them in more detail, they would describe the fact that they would help get their husbands ready to go fishing. They would help load the boat. Sometimes they would go out fishing with them. They would pull in the nets. They would help process the catch. They would help sell the catch. They would handle the household income coming from the fishing activity, and so on. It was more about the identification of their role in fishing, which was not part of that conversation. And so that led to a PhD student who's gone on to do some incredible research around gender roles in marine conservation, Danica Kleiber, to do her PhD around this topic, and to look at some of the conservation tools that we were using around marine protected areas to see how that worked from a gender perspective. And what we found is that women, primarily the fishing that they engaged in is called gleaning, so collecting shells and things like that from the shallow nearshore environment, and often those areas were part of marine protected areas. So these were actually marginalising them from their livelihood activities. And while they may turn up for meetings about marine resource management, they weren't feeling that they had a role to play or a decision-making role as part of that. So really understanding how women are using the marine environment, how they're sourcing their livelihoods, and how marine conservation measures may unintentionally impact particular parts of communities and particularly women is something that was very poorly thought about, but needs to be much more integral to marine conservation. And it's not just a case of thinking about the Philippines. When we look across the board, and this is some work I was involved with colleagues in Bangladesh, we discovered very similar things. So women have dominant roles in some aspects of fisheries, but it's primarily men who are going out catching fish and making the decisions on how marine resources are managed. So this is really important to understand if we're to make effective conservation interventions. And as we expand into other areas of marine conservation work beyond fisheries and thinking about the common, a lot of narrative around plastic pollution and the impact of plastic on the ocean, some work we also did in both India and Bangladesh revealed that the role of women in deciding what happens with plastic and choices they make about consumption are influenced by things like their budget, managing the household budget, the time they have available, and the choices they make about whether they go out and buy quick and easy things packaged in plastic or have time to support their children or do other household activities. So it means that as we look at alternatives to plastic and mechanisms to reduce the plastic pollution, we need to be thinking about the users of the plastic and the limitations and barriers to change, largely around performance and affordability, with it being particularly acute in the case of women. So as we've looked to design our conservation interventions, we've really focused on trying to provide opportunities that address the barriers to women for marine conservation and increase their role in having decision-making behaviour opportunities and participation opportunities, such as developing these community banks, which address some of the issues around saving and access to finance, and have become majority female in many of the countries in which we work. So that's really thinking about are really appreciating and understanding gender roles at the level of the implementing marine conservation. But what's it like as a marine conservationist, and what's the sort of career development opportunities? Well, we know from the literature that gender diversity and being more inclusive and thinking about gender diversity leads to more effective and efficient solving of problems, especially around environmental issues. That women have higher levels of social sensitivity, and if you have teams with a higher percentage of women, that boosts the collective intelligence, particularly around natural resource conservation. And women often raise important and neglected concerns. So if we aren't being inclusive and representative across genders within teams, then we're not going to have the best opportunity to solve the world's marine conservation problems. Where we're at currently is about 39% of ocean scientists globally are women, but recognition and support differs widely depending on which country those women are in. And there are very big differences in terms of career progression. There's also, for early career researchers and conservationists, there's a lack of recognition and opportunities and funding that these are both the intellectual workforce and the actual workforce who are going to be dealing with the marine conservation problems of the future. And career progression becomes a really key point. This is my career progression through being a child enjoying the beach and being passionate about becoming a marine biologist, being a mother and enjoying an active program of marine conservation work around the world. And what we see is that the gender gap gets bigger as your career develops, where you're making choices about family, about your role in the household, about work-life balance. And this paper shows how that changes over time in terms of access to funding, of research grants, of leadership in research institutions, about first and last authorships on papers. And so we need to be really thinking about that as we go forward. A study across the EU showed that only 13 to 24% of senior positions held in ocean institutes are by women. So there's still a very long way to go. But there are a lot of resources and solutions out there, and some areas to be thinking about. And this is something that I'm very focused on as I have built my career over the last nearly 30 years. We know that there are gaps and problems with equality in hiring, in anything that's competitive, and in evaluations. And that comes from needing to support a more balanced home and work life. We also need to recognise areas of vulnerability. So unfortunately, harassment is widespread in the workforce. And this report I've shown an image of here, promoting safety in field sciences, reframes harassment in terms of both a health and safety issue and also a research ethics perspective. So this is a really important area that we need to be thinking about going forwards, of how we identify those areas of vulnerability and start to solve those, which can be done through mentorship, training, and proactively tackling those points of vulnerability. Another area I'd also like to highlight is the lack of women voices in media. And if we're going to really make a difference for the ocean, for marine conservation, and for profile ocean science, then we have to provide a more comfortable platform for women to feel that they are able to present views in the media, which we know from research is a much harder thing for women to do. This sits within a broader framework of inequity. This map always strikes me as showing the inequity of ocean science publications globally and at the top, and of citations of those at the bottom. And this is something that we really need to address more broadly, not just thinking about gender, but thinking about wider issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in the UK, that's particularly acute. If we look at the environmental sector, we are the second whitest profession in the UK after farming. So this is an area that we have to look at, thinking of conservation generally, and particularly around marine conservation, where technical knowledge and specific areas of ocean science and conservation can marginalise certain groups and genders in particular. So my work is also linked seamlessly from the previous presentation as being part of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, where I'm leading and coordinating a marine science programme for the Indian Ocean. And that's a vital opportunity for us to really look at how we address some of these inequities and imbalances, both in gender and in other aspects of diversity and inclusion. And that's where I'm really focusing to not just think about the quality of calibre of the science, the impact it makes in terms of conservation, but how we really develop the field into something that is far more equitable and inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. Quite impressive. You might have noticed, by the way, that I'm doing a small, simple polls while you listen to the speakers. I want, before we let you talk, Mike, it seems, do you see any effect of the engagement with respect to engaging more women, Heather? Is that, I mean, you spent quite a lot of your resources doing this work. So do you see a result, or are you very patiently waiting for it?
I think it's recognising the barriers to access. Some of the pictures I showed there were from work I did with National Geographic on a field expedition, working with some amazing scientists across disciplines from India and Bangladesh, and fieldwork opportunities are very limited, partly because of concerns of being of safety from family and perceptions of women in the field. So developing an international team that provided safe and supportive community to enable that fieldwork was really transformational in terms of developing careers for those young women who've gone on to do amazing things. They would probably anyway, but I think it's understanding the barriers and creating those opportunities where possible. I think the other element is obviously access to research and training, and recognizing that it's much more expensive to come and do further research in a university in the West, in the global North. If you're an international student, and we need to look at providing far more funding for training to allow transfer of knowledge both from the global South to the global North and vice versa. So I think there's some really great opportunities to progress from the small in terms of making conferences welcome and supportive and safe, through to increasing opportunities for training and mentorship. And mentorship is really key. That's made a huge difference in my career. I suspect all of us here can think through those people who've made life easy or difficult, and having supportive mentors, I think, is something that we need to be more proactive on, and looking at how we do that formally or informally in the workplace.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we will be able to discuss more at the end. And thank you, Shira, for your questions. We will address them at the end. I just couldn't help myself and use my privilege as the leader of the webinar. Now, Maaike, I think you need my help to share the presentation. So I will share my screen,
Yes.
but I will let you introduce yourself first so we get to know you a little bit.
Excellent. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So my name is Maaike Zondervoort. I grew up in Norway, in Trondheim, but did most of my schooling in English-speaking countries. So I was very lucky and privileged to have the funding from the Norwegian government to do so. Right now, I'm an associate research scholar at Princeton University, and I'm also affiliated with the Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Lab, that are one of the leaders in terms of developing climate models. So that's what I'll be talking about later. I'm also an affiliate assistant professor at the University of Washington that have a very nice school of oceanography. So I'm incredibly privileged in terms of the locations where I've been able to work. The presentation that I'll be giving shortly is also focusing on physical oceanography, where I thought I'd highlight also the work of some of my students. And I think that's it for an introduction from me. If you want to help me share my slides, Bente.
Yes, I will. I think this is the one. Let me see. I have normally I have a lot of fans open. We'll share this, I think. Yes, so you see a little bit of all my fans. I think we will have to do it like this, Maaike. So go ahead.
I think the number of tabs would also be reflective of my current browser. But so I was going to present some of my work looking at how we can leverage the data revolution for understanding global ocean health. Next slide, please. Where the work that I do really focuses on areas that I recognize as having great socioeconomic importance. So here you're seeing two examples from sea level rise, for example, that has a huge impact on coastal communities, and also fisheries catch. And really the goal of my work is to try and provide actionable information for decision makers. Next slide, please. And with my work, this is a figure from a recent Invited Review article. What I've been able to leverage is bringing in new methods from, say, artificial intelligence to try and aid and accelerate the progress that we've been seeing, where the progress in oceanography and physical oceanography really has been paced by our ability to measure things. Next slide, please. Great. And so for me, the future really is covering and integrating different approaches. So also leveraging the increasingly complex data we have, where I'll be going through just an example from the North Atlantic, which I thought was thematically appropriate, where really what my work does is focus on robust and trustworthy method application. Next slide, please. And for the ocean is really a unique component of the climate system and also within the weather, because it has a very large heat capacity. So it can very quickly release a lot of heat to the atmosphere, which which makes it really a grand challenge to try and develop smart monitoring for both climate and weather. And on the left there, you see an example of surface temperature where you can see red is warm and blue is cold. And we see patterns, and these patterns is the type of work that I do in terms of trying to leverage them, because we have a lot of data from the surface, but not so much from the deep. Next slide, please. And for me, one of the things that I've been able to do is develop circulation fingerprints. So identify ocean regimes that can tell us something about the deep. And here a regime is defined as a dominant balance of terms in an equation, so momentum terms in this work. And to do this work, nominally this would happen in a somewhat ad hoc fashion, but with the use of data science and AI, we can really lean on these objective measures, where my work determined 6 global dynamical regimes, and I'll explain their significance. Next slide, please. Where these 6 global dynamical regimes coherently emerge, taking the full complexity of the ocean and analyzing this using machine learning, and the regimes are described in this paper at the bottom. Next slide, please, because I wanted to focus on what they do and what they mean here. So if we just look at this sketch from the North Atlantic, and this was also mentioned in the NOAA AI strategy, we can see that we have different regimes. These are the colors. Next slide, please. And these very conveniently map onto distinct ocean features. And these ocean features are also very important for understanding the global climate and weather. For example, on the boundary of on the western side of the Atlantic, we have the stacking of regimes, and these constitute the Gulf Stream. So this really powerful current that moves heat north. We can also see, for example, in the dark blue streak, the circulation that brings heat across the basin. So with these two-dimensional dynamical regimes represented by the colors, we have this 3-dimensional picture of what the ocean circulation is actually doing. Next slide, please. And with this then, what I was able to do was to develop a method to track these together with a collaborator. And this we call tracking global heating with ocean regimes. And in an effort to also make this accessible to researchers from less privileged institutions, we built a cloud platform where really to play with this and to develop this, all you need is your laptop. You don't need to download anything. You don't need to have access to HPC. And to do this recognition, we use deep learning. So we took the dynamical regimes and then we built a deep neural network to be able to recognize the dynamical regimes, and also addressing another very important question for addressing the health of the planet in terms of understanding climate. We used only fields available from the surface. And this was motivated both by the fact that these are areas we have access to through satellites, but also to leverage these large intercomparison projects. This is usually the data you have access to. Next slide, please. And this is part of the application part of this talk, where the issue as an oceanographer that I often have is that if I'm interested in how the ocean changes in a future climate, actually understanding this on the basis of the data that's often used to make policy decisions. To do this, we use things, for example, like CMIP, the Climate Model Intercomparison Project. But these projects, although they're very, very useful and used for decision making at large scales, understanding something about the ocean, understanding why it's actually changing, is very hard because the data just can't be shared. It can't be stored because it's too big. And the grand challenge that we're targeting here is how we can use the sparse data we do have for full system understanding. Next slide, please. So here I'm just going to go through an example of a question I get a lot, which is, what's going to happen with the Gulf Stream? Is it going to shut down? And of course, in Northern Europe, this is something we care about especially. So with the healthy, vigorous Gulf Stream, you can see there on the figure to the far left, we have a Gulf Stream that when the circulation weakens, it shifts north. You also have the path of heat delivery not reaching as far north, so that's the purple circle. And you also have less dense cold waters or dense waters being formed in the higher latitudes. So you have less warm water coming north, and you also have less returning south. Next slide, please. So if you now apply this Thor method to a climate model, so all we need is the surface fields. We run it through this mechanism, and I'm going to show you how we can interpret this quickly. And here I've taken one of the CMIT models, these Climate Model into Comparison Project models, and used the GFDL Earth System model. And here you can see the results from a historical simulation. So what we're seeing today, a 1% CO2 scenario. So we've increased CO2 by 1% annually. And then also a 4 times CO2 scenario where in the future we have had the Earth system react to just suddenly having 4 times CO2 in the atmosphere. So we're really hitting the system with a hammer. And we know that the overturning circulation, this heat engine, is going to slow down if we increase the CO2 in the atmosphere. So the question that we're now asking is why? Within these 3 different triggers, or within these 3 different signatures, what's actually happening? What dynamics are actually changing? Next slide, please. And in terms of interpreting this, this is just to help our eyes a little bit. The top row here shows you what happens with the Gulf Stream in terms of picking out these dynamical regimes. And indeed, as the circulation weakens, the Gulf Stream shifts north. And the middle row here shows you the heat delivery across the basin, which starts off as a nice trumpet shape and then progressively doesn't reach as far north. And also the areas of dense water formation are seen to shift to regions that have less dense waters formed. Next slide, please. So with this, I've come to the last component of my talk, looking at transparent and trustworthy artificial intelligence. Because I mentioned that what we've been using is based on deep learning, for example, and to really apply these methods to climate change scenarios, and indeed anything that has something to do with making decisions for policy or otherwise, making sure that we are actually delivering robust, reliable, and safe tools is something that I've discussed in numerous papers. For example, the perspective in Nature Machine Intelligence that came out earlier this year. Next slide, please. And this is incredibly important also within understanding weather. So here's just an example where even the Weather Service can be racially biased. And of course, this is not intentional in any way, shape, or form. But here in this example, you see the green circles show you where you have good radar coverage. And the shading shows you where you have predominantly Black populations. And you can see that there's an unfortunate lack of good radar coverage where you actually have Black populations. And this, of course, means that if you train a neural network to do, for example, hurricane prediction, it's going to be less good where Black people live. And this is not intentional at all, but as you can see, I put the logos of the US and the EU there on the side, and these bodies are also calling for trustworthy AI, which I think is incredibly important. Next slide, please. And doing this as well, I wanted to highlight the work of one of my students, Mariana Claire. We're trying to quantify trust in the tools that we're using and also develop tools that other people can take and use in their work, where what we're trying to do here can be just understood in terms of teaching a machine to say, I don't know. And for us here, we've moved to a Bayesian framework. So we're trying to do this in a probabilistic fashion to be able to teach a machine to tell us what in the input it learned from and what then that means for a future climate. So I'm very focused on the climate question. And these methods are still in their infancy to some extent, and developing these is something that I also think is incredibly important. Next slide, please. So that brings me to the end here. What I wanted to just show you was that we're taking all of these different components here, and this is just one aspect of my work, but really what I'm hoping and seeing the community that I'm a part of moving towards is a paradigm shift where we're really bringing together these complex data sets with the new methods we have for more for a better way of understanding climate change, so that we can mitigate and adapt where possible. Next slide, please. And with that, I want to thank you very much, and also acknowledge my collaborator and my funding sources. And please go check out what we have built, the Thor framework in the cloud, and I also just highlight some publications there. And thank you very much for having me speak here today.
Thank you so much, Maaike. I will unshare, and I think just by having the three of you here to talk about different aspects of the ocean already illustrate the complexity and the many different perspectives that we can look at sustainability related to the ocean. Now, I just have to ask, Maaike, when it comes to artificial intelligence, of course, we are training the algorithms, and that's when it comes to geophysics itself, there is hard to see any gender perspective, but when training algorithms, that's when you have the human factor. Is this something that you are conscious about, or is this being discussed?
In terms of gender bias?
Yes, there are different ways of training, that different approaches that might influence the way you train your algorithms, and putting it like that.
So in terms of choices of algorithm, is that the question?
Yeah, what you put in there, the parameters, the way
question. So in terms of the choices of the input fields, I think there's certainly to some extent room for bias there, because there's a long history of what fields you use, for example. And to some extent as well, I didn't say this as explicitly, but within physical oceanography, in the previous talk showed you some statistics. If you break that down to physics, the statistics are much, much worse, I can assure you. But for some of the work that I do, I try to really also be rooted in as unbiased a set of input features as I can be, which to some extent also is to avoid being distracted by legacy. So within physical oceanography, because the system is so big and so complex, we very often confined to a certain set of things that we can measure, which is set by a range of different things. And I think trying to be unbiased there is really important, which really is also, for the Thor method that I just presented, a cornerstone of why we can do this trustworthiness assessment as well. I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much. And again, please do write questions in the chat. We will come back to them. Natalie, I think you can sort of conclude and tell us about how we are working on gender in the equality, diversity, and inclusion subgroup of GEO. So, Natalie?
Yes. Hopefully you can see my slides, because I can't see you anymore.
No. And please remember to introduce yourself as well.
Okay, but you can see my slides.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So hello, my name is Natalie Bettarelli. I work with Bente on GEO's equality, diversity, and inclusion, something I'm about to introduce. I also work with Heather at the Zoological Society of London, being a conservation biologist. And today I want to talk to you about how those different spheres have collided for me, and how today, the International Women's Day, is a good day to talk about that collision of spheres. To me, International Women's Day is a really important day to talk about the achievements of women, the barrier that they are facing, and how to go to a more to achieve gender parity. But actually, it's also more than that, in a way that it's also an annual reminder of the difference and how the difference among people, and how those differences shouldn't be feared or annihilated, but more valued and celebrated. And also how bias, stereotype, and discrimination ultimately are at the roots of many professional communities failing to, and societies in general, failing to achieve diversity, equality, equitability, and inclusivity. Now, the thing is, as a conservation biologist, or as climate people working in the climate industry, or anyone that has to do with anything that has to do with society, really, is aware that we are currently facing huge societal, ecological, and economical challenges. And as such, we can't really do, or we can't afford to lose any of the current and future brain power to inequality. We can't simply afford to not recruit the diversity of perspective, skills, and background that can help us address those enormous challenges. Now, addressing those world's challenges, whether it's climate change, pollution, food security, pollution, has all to do with data, because you need to know what's happening, where it's happening, why it's happening, and whether whatever you're going to do about it is working. And it requires global data, because these are global challenges. They are happening everywhere. And they need to be relevant to the task at hand. They really need to target the type of information that you need to develop that understanding or develop solution. And this is really what GEO's mission is about. So the Global Earth Observation is a partnership of more than 100 national governments and more than 100 participating organizations that really come together to put together resources, data, that enable a coordinated and comprehensive approach to tackling those world challenges, primarily through the delivery and enhanced accessibility of Earth observation. But what GEO has more and more reckoned with is that this is not just about data. If you want to address the world challenges, you also need to care about people, because addressing those challenges really require global engagement and the support of the whole community, that community that reflects the diversity of backgrounds and point of view that is really required to develop adequate, effective, inclusive, fair, and global solution. Now, the space and the Earth's observation sector, which are the sectors that you primarily found in GEO, bring together a broad spectrum of skills and discipline, but is generally known for its relatively reduced diversity among its professionals, particularly when it comes to gender. I don't think it would surprise any person working in the space observations, the space and Earth observation sector, to say that it's a sector that is relatively dominated by men. It's also a sector that requires significant resources and capacity, because you're dealing with a not cheap technology in many cases, and significant requirement in terms of skills and experience to deal, process, manage, store, analyze those big data, which to some extent limits the accessibility of that sector in many parts of the world. So those barriers to inclusion and engagement could potentially be quite important barriers to delivering on GEO's mission, for some of the reasons that I think Heather's talk really covered well. So in response to this, in 2020, GEO established its first equality, diversity, and inclusion subgroup. And the idea of that subgroup is really to support the strategic aim of making GEO an institution that is committed to provide a fair, supportive, and encouraging network environment where a diverse set of participants are able to engage responsibly. Now, the initial focus of that subgroup has really been put on looking and, whenever needed, increasing diversity when it comes to geography, gender, and generation. So what has been the progress so far? And why am I talking to you about this? Primarily because I would like you to know about this and also to engage with it if you find this interesting. Knowing that this platform is there to really try to bring to life some of the issue that we have been talking about during this seminar, but also trying to find solution as to how we can coordinate the effort globally, which is quite an interesting question. But also to let you know how things have been going and where we are at, in case this has any resonance with some of the work you're doing or something that you would like to engage with. So since the subgroup has been launched in 2020, it has been meeting regularly monthly. And the first thing that it did was to produce a big report, the first report when it comes to GEO, to really report on geographic and gender diversity in GEO's infrastructure. So really looking at diversity in staff, in committees and program boards, in working group, in speakers and participants at events, whether you're looking at awardees and applicants to awards of GEO award, or whether you're looking at recruitment, so trying to get as much information as possible as to what's going on in GEO when it comes to diversity. And that led to a first set of recommendations when it comes to opportunities to improve inclusivity and access to some of these infrastructure within GEO. It also led to the drafting of the first GEO statement on equality, diversity, and inclusion, which was just adopted by GEO plenary in November last year. And currently, our priority when it comes to what we're doing right now is really looking at better coordination and engagement with those regional GEO entities. So GEO has a number of groups that tend to bring people together regionally. And the idea is to try to work better with those groups to coordinate our EDI agendas, and so that we are not reinventing the wheel, and we learn from each other as to how to improve access or equity or fairness in different parts of the world. The second thing that we have been dealing with is trying to make sure that there's a coherent framework for collecting EDI data across GEO, really streamlining the type of EDI data that we are trying to collect, notably during GEO events. But also to think about developing how we could have reliable and well-timed communication strategy when it comes to EDI, so that we have regular engagement and that we start to get a response and opportunity for dialogue with the GEO community. And then the last thing that has happened quite recently is the development of a GEO youth community of practice, with the term of reference just published, which is basically an initiative that is trying to bring younger people, the youth, so early career professional, into GEO, so that we have a higher opportunity to hear their voices, their concerns, but also how they would like to see things changing. So just to finish, what do you think, or what is this GEO EDI statement about? Basically, it's structured around 5 pillars, which have to do with oversight and accountability, community leadership and advocacy, creating a welcoming and supportive environment, outreach and engagement, and empowerment through accessibility. This community leadership and advocacy type of work is really to try to develop action and events to increase awareness within the Earth observation community about the benefits of inclusive participation by people from all sectors and all backgrounds. This is really to start to build up the narrative as to why diversity is important to GEO's mission and how GEO can benefit from having processes and way of dealing that improve engagement across different sector and background. Creating a welcoming, supportive environment is really to maximize diversity in GEO governance structure. So not just meeting and events, but also any kind of structure that has decisive powers, such as a program board or executive committee. So trying to bring more diversity in those platforms. The third one has to do with making sure that GEO talks and reach out and engage a dialogue with a diverse set of communities, so doesn't talk to people that are interested in GEO to start with or working with GEO anyway, but really start to address concerns and issues that are relevant to a broader set of people. Empowerment through accessibility has all to do with making sure that the data that the GEOs bring, that GEO's effort bring together, really are beneficial to everyone, so that people can access it in ways that secure standardized information, transparent information, and through platforms that are easily known and accessible to people. Oversight and accountability is why that subgroup was created, to really provide a mechanism by which GEO looks at itself regularly and look at its diversity and how to do better in that arena. And that's it. So that was a short and last little introduction to the work that we have been doing with Bente and others for the past 2 years. And if there's anything that interests you in here or something that you would like to support, please get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. I see that my camera has problems of getting started again. I don't know why. So apologies for that. But can we come back to the you with the cameras? I see that. This has been so great. I mean, it's always fascinating to hear the different perspective, different use cases of Earth observations, because I think that's the common denominator here, that we are using Earth observations in one form or another. We have one question. I promised that we would answer a question from Shira. I see that you, Ute, you already did in the chat, but since this will be recorded, it is recorded, and it might be nice to have this also in the recording. So the question from Shira is, she has two, or he, aside from the trust issue that the ILIAD platform addresses, what incentives exist to encourage data generators to share their data? That's number one. What did you answer?
Yes, I answered that. So one, you have to ask yourself, what is the problem that people don't share data? And often people do not share data because they either do not have the possibility, so we give people the platform to share their data. And another incentive might be that we create a platform with this underlying architecture that lets you decide how to share your data. So you can even decide to share the data only with the system, not with anyone else. Or you share your data with the system immediately, and you share with everybody else at a later stage, because sometimes data are very valuable for a specific period of time, and afterwards they are not available, for example, in the private sector anymore, while they are still immensely valuable for climate researchers, for example. So there are different ways of this platform, how you can share your data. And I think that you can enrich your data with the data from others and from this platform. That is a high incentive for people to share the data.
Yes, so that was probably also an answer to question number 2. Could you elaborate a bit on the type of data that will be in ILIAD and how it might be used? Well, yes. Partly, maybe, yeah.
Yes, so we have several platforms that come from the project partners. And I have mentioned the Ocean Data Platform, which is operated in Norway by Hub Ocean, and contains a lot of data. And they are also have an important part in the Ocean Data Action Coalition to give incentives to people and specifically the private sector to share the data. We have the Marine Spatial Planning Challenge platform, and we have, of course, the Marinomica platform that comes from the Odyssea platform. And there is a reason for that this project is called Iliad, because half of our, or almost half of our project partners come from Odyssea, and there is the Marinomica platform. So these platforms alone go in. But of course, we want to connect to other platforms that exist and have existed in the European ecosystem for some times. And then, of course, you have to mention EMODNet, and you have to mention the Earth observation data that we have by Copernicus, which is then brought to life by Mercator Ocean, for example. And there are more. There is SeaDataNet, there's the Blue Cloud. So there are several that are to be mentioned, and we will work to get access and provide access to these data as well.
Yes, and I might add, we also have NextGeos, data hub and platform. And as a matter of fact, since this is a joint NextGeos and GEO event, the NextGeos data catalog is actually providing a possibility to, through OpenSearch API, for those who know what that is, to go search on GEOS, the Global Earth Observing System of Systems that is being organized by GEO. So there's a link through, so Iliad will actually be through the capacity of NextGeos, be directly connected then to GEOS in that way. And you also have NextGeos as on the yellow pages. So there, I mean, the Iliad is connected to GEO. That's the point I wanted to make. And
yes,
we hope to make that even better. As you say,
it probably drowned on the scary Gaia X slide, but we want to use the NextGeos catalog and, of course, use this source of data as well.
Yes, because what I read, if I may, to add somewhat, what type of data will it be? It's data collected by satellites, by in situ measurements like tide gauges, for instance, and all types of geophysical parameters. But you also can, we also will be able to catalog and make it possible statistics data, economic data, you know, the whole range of data types. Then also modeling, and also services and products.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we also have to connect to infrastructure, because you can either bring the data to the processing, or you can bring the processing to the data. This might also be interesting for Mike, who is doing AI on data, and not everybody might be comfortable to give you that data, but you could send your algorithm to this data and then do the machine learning there.
Yes. So Mike, have you experienced any hesitance with respect to willingness to share data when you are doing your machine learning processes?
Yes, to some extent. I think I would say that the major hurdle we have has been overall dissemination issues. So with these big climate modeling projects, storing the data and actually giving it to people has been a major hurdle, where I think hesitance in sharing potentially doesn't come from not wanting to, but not having the ability to. And something that I would also highlight in terms of increasing diversity in who actually does the science, which is something that I'm very interested in, is also, I think, very compatible to what was discussed by other speakers here, Ute, for example, where being able to do the computations with direct access to the data would be very beneficial, where my work currently has been using a cloud platform so that users don't have to download any data and don't need access to HPC, particularly also in terms of using AI methods. This is very, very nice, because a lot of the modern platforms, for example, cloud computing platforms, make this somewhat more easy.
But since data analysis has now become so technical, and I mean, we know the work share of women in computer science is still rather low. So it's even lower than in other scientific areas. So do you think that is an extra obstacle that we are now facing? So I'm getting a bit concerned because I want to, for example, to use the digital twins for ocean conservation, and of course, we want to use machine learning and AI to get there and to have the best available forecast and parts in our digital twin. So if this all now adds to our biases, so that also means for me I have to be explicitly concerned about this.
Yes, no, I hear you. I think the computer sciences are also a science where we really struggle to reach any sort of diversity on many levels. And there, my experience largely has been that there are women that are very interested and have a lot of expertise, but they might not recognize themselves as having that and being that. So, for example, two of the students that I work with, Mariana Claire, I highlighted in my talk. She comes from an engineering background, but is an expert in, for example, Bayesian neural networks. But she might not market herself as such. And similarly, another student that I have, Yvonne Jennings, who's based in Germany now, actually, she identifies more as a data scientist. But I think, which would fall into that category. But I think the gender, calling it a divide is a little bit too strong. But the gender issues within the computer science community and the potential, for example, for not giving, so within my work, for example, the importance of being able to teach, quote unquote, a machine to say, I don't know, and to be able to say, okay, there might be biases, let's go look for them, is something that might be enhanced by having more diverse teams of people actually looking at these questions and trying to address them. And for example, there are many examples where, for example, I showed the one of the radar coverage, but there are many others where if you're using machine learning and if you're trying to incorporate these methods, not being aware and not looking for biases, I think is so easy. And really, I think you can do a lot of harm if you inadvertently, by taking the human out of the loop in a larger extent that you might normally, that you're more likely to introduce that type of bias. So yeah, I think in answer to your question, I would look for the people that don't identify themselves as experts, but actually are, and that this is very important.
It's funny because this sounds very similar to what Heather was describing with the fishing communities. So Heather had to leave, by the way, but it sounds very similar to me. That you don't identify.
These issues are present within most realms of academia and beyond, because you don't necessarily recognize the talent that you have, and we all know about imposter syndrome, for example. So I completely agree with what was said earlier in terms of mentorship and being able to take ownership of both your talents but also your work. And yes, I mean, I operate mainly in the academic realm, but I certainly see this, and I saw parallels within your talk. So yes, I think it's very important to recognize.
Yes, and today, since we are celebrating Women's Day, I think this is a nice opportunity to bring that forward. So to remind us all about these issues that we need to address to be able to better take care of our planet in this case. So Natalie, do you want to add something to the conversation here? I see we're a little bit over an hour, or well, 20 minutes actually. But we didn't actually say that it would last just 1 hour. It depends on, how the discussion goes, but I think it's appropriate. We are so much in front of the computers now. So Natalie, since you and we are sort of organizing this together, maybe you want to say some concluding words, or how do you feel?
No, it's been great to bring different perspective, both from the clearly applied side of advancing a project, producing data, and seeing the kind of barriers that are getting there, or the kind of bias that could alter the conclusion, up into having an actual discussion about how do you go on about this, and what are the kind of initiatives that are trying to move forward the agenda. So it was a great seminar. I really enjoyed having hearing from talks I would have probably never heard in my life. So no, thank you very much to the speakers, and Bente, to you for organizing this.
Yeah, thank you so much. If you want to, first of all, you will get the replay for everybody that signed up for this. We'll get the replay of the webinar in your inbox. We are also planning on writing a short blog post, and I invite both Ute and Maaike to contribute with that, with your presentations, coming along with the recording, and also a few words in summary to make it easier for people to consume this information afterwards. And like you said, Natalie, it's so interesting, this webinar platform that we have in XGEOS have given me so much pleasure. You learn so much, and I will use this opportunity to invite you, if you have proposals for a topic that we should address in a webinar, I'm more than happy to organize the webinar. That goes for both you, Natalie, on your other topics that you're interested in. Maaike, for you, of course, if you are interested in inviting or co-organizing with XGEOS here, a webinar to address issues that you're concerned with. Ute, you know that already because we are working together in ILIAD, but I extend it to go even further. So please do contact us. Yes. Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry for the lack of camera. Normally I'm smiling and waving, but until the next time, and have a jolly good rest of the International Women's Day. Bye bye for now.
Thank you. Bye bye.